if you are longing to have a deeply fulfilling relationship, it's possible for you. I personally believe that it's all about learning how to build healthy boundaries, because I know who I am and who I am not. I know what's my responsibility and what's not. I tell the truth. I communicate openly and clearly and directly, which I learned how to do by building healthy boundaries.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast, a podcast for those looking to overcome their addictions, their trauma, their stories, and attachments that no longer serve them. So I'm really excited about my last 2 weeks I've had in Costa Rica. I am really adapting to this land. I have so far seen 2 tarantulas. I have seen all kinds of amazing bird species, and I've ate some of the biggest mangoes of my life. It's been quite the experience. So the last 2 weeks of Costa Rica have been really, really interesting. A lot of emotions, a lot of things I did not expect coming in. And, I'm really integrating all of it. And thank you for being here as I do this experience with you and get to share this experience. And by the way, if you're listening to the Entrepreneurs in Recovery podcast or you're tuning into the YouTube, please use the listener submission form if you have any feedback about the show. If you want to share your story, you want to share anonymously, whatever, use that form. Let me know if you're enjoying the show. Let me know what you're struggling with or how you're thriving, or if you're enjoying the show, or maybe there's a guest that you heard that you want to get in contact with and get more information. Go ahead and use that listener submission form that I put in each and every one of the show notes of each episode. So I'm excited today to introduce Barb Nangle. Barb is the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I got to say, folks, I was really blown away by this episode. I didn't know what to expect. Barb reached out to me. I often have guests reach out. I do some research, and I wasn't sure exactly where we were going to go. She is very successful in podcasting. She's a very successful boundaries coach. And that's really where she got me. This episode is really like a clinic on boundaries. And if there's anything that I've needed to learn over the last several decades is boundaries. So if you are one of those people too, and you are really, really excited to learn more about how do I set boundaries? What are boundaries? What is codependency? And just learning more ways to take care of yourself. This is a fantastic episode. So I'm really excited. Tune in, enjoy the show. And also, if you can, like and subscribe to the podcast, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This helps to have more people reach this show. Thank you so much. Hi, Barb. Welcome to the show.
Excellent. I'm so glad to be here, Jesse. I've really been looking forward to this. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks for reaching out to me to come on the show. I really like that. I have certain guests that have reached out to me and wanted to be on the show. And then we get to have a connection and I get to learn about their platform. And I go, wow, cool. I've never had a guest on to talk about boundaries and codependency and all these things that you do to help individuals and entrepreneurs. And you have a podcast yourself. Having you on the show is amazing because I'm really curious about these topics. So before we dive into that, I'd like to know a little bit more about you and your story. So if you would, with our guests, just maybe tell us how you became the Barb we know today.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I'll start in 2015 when I was 52. I hit a codependent bottom. And if there's anybody listening that doesn't know what codependence is, welcome to the club, because I didn't either, even though I was incredibly well read in the self-help genre and had been in therapy since about age 15. And, I read all the books. I did the workshops and workbooks and spiritual things and retreats and you name it. And it happened because I was volunteering for a project at my church that served homeless people. And right around that time, a homeless guy named Dan started coming as a parishioner to my church. And we became very friendly. And I sort of took it as like a sign from God. Like I get to meet a homeless person so that when I'm serving homeless people, they're really personified for me. They're not like the homeless, but individuals. And a couple months into our friendship, we had a pretty bad snowstorm here in New Haven, Connecticut. So I invited him to stay at my home, which I now know is not normal. And he did. And then I invited him again and again. And within weeks, he was practically living with me. And I felt trapped in my own home. And one day I was talking about him in a therapy session. And I stopped in mid-sentence and I went, oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon? And my therapist was like, yes. And I'm assuming because this is Entrepreneurs in Recovery, people are familiar with Al-Anon. And so I went home to Google, don't know what I typed in. I was looking for Al-Anon, but I came across the word codependent, and I was blindsided by it. I couldn't believe there was this word out there. I started going to Codependence Anonymous, or CODA, and very quickly felt a sense of relief. And also very quickly said to somebody, I think I need to be reparented. But I thought I made that word up. I didn't know that that was a thing. And 6 weeks into going to CODA, I went to Cape Cod to visit some close friends, one of whom had been in AA for many years. And she'd always just raved about how dramatically her life was transformed. So I was like, hey, I've been going to CODA. And she was like, oh my God, that's so great. Let's see if we can find a CODA meeting while you're here. And she couldn't, but she found an ACA meeting, which I had heard of as ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. I had heard of it as long as I remembered. I had no idea why adult children of alcoholics would need a program. And it never occurred to me that I qualified. It turns out it's actually called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. For that, I actually qualify. So, but I didn't know that until we went into the meeting. And I said, I'll go for you, because her dad was an alcoholic. And I walk in, and among other things, they said, we parent ourselves. And I was like, wait, what? That's the thing? And then they read the list of the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. And I was hooked. And now my friend tells me that I sobbed the whole meeting. I don't remember that. I bought the literature, came home to New Haven, Connecticut, started going to ACA weekly. Very quickly, another women's group started for ACA. I'm still in that group. That's my home group now. The first meeting folded because of the pandemic. And then not long after that, I started doing the steps with some of the women in the group and really started to see some dramatic changes. And the things that came up for me in my first couple of years in recovery, none of that stuff ever came up in my 37 years of therapy and all of that work that I did. The way I think of it, Jesse, is all of the self-help and personal development things that I did over all those decades scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, and recovery melted the iceberg of my life. So for me, recovery is where it's at. About a year into that, I decided to let go of CODA because I just wasn't experiencing the kind of recovery in that program the way that I was in ACA. And that turned out to be a higher powered moment because one of the women that I was doing the 12 steps with had started going to Overeaters Anonymous and was trying to very subtly get me to go into the program. And I went, and it turns out I didn't even know compulsive eating was a thing. I didn't know I was a compulsive overeater. I'm now down 100 pounds from my top weight. In that program, we call it being abstinent, which is the equivalent of being sober in an alcohol program. So I've been abstinent in OA for 8 years since April of 2016. And I've been a member of ACA since April of 2015. And through a series of serendipitous events, I ended up getting laid off from my full-time job at Yale University, where I'm a sociologist by training. I have a master's degree in sociology, and I was a program coordinator for urban education programs, which were primarily college access programs. So I worked behind the scenes and made stuff happen. I was also on the research and evaluation team. And I got laid off after 19 years there. And I, through a series of serendipitous events, decided to start my own coaching and consulting business. Soon after, started my podcast, which is called Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. Never occurred to me that that would have anything to do with my business. It was a way for me to carry the message of recovery because I was very clear. There is so much wisdom in 12-Step Recovery that is just not making its way out into the world. And so I've been doing that podcast since March of 2019. I have 273 episodes as of today, weekly episodes. And it turns out that it's the way that I get most of my clients. After doing just sort of generalized life coaching for a while, I decided to niche into boundaries. For one, you need a niche. That's just the way that it works in the business world. But also because of my lived experience of not having boundaries for 50-something years, and then the dramatic impact of building healthy boundaries on my life, and now like seeing the difference in my life, I have this ability to not just articulate like what my lived experience was like, what it felt like in my body to not have boundaries and to have them, and the emotional experience, but also the journey. Like, what does it take? And all of the clients I'd worked with previously really needed help with boundaries. And also boundaries permeate really every area of your life. So I could coach people on just about anything. I really focus on professional women like, managers, business owners, nonprofit workers who say yes when they really want to say no, and who neglect themselves because they're so focused on other people. And what I've done over time is, let me just put a pin in that for a second and say, like, once I started having healthy boundaries and I could see the massive impact, I realized that I built boundaries through this sort of haphazard, meandering path through the 12 steps of recovery. I didn't even know that was what I was doing in the beginning. But once I was, these boundaries things are amazing, I started reading specifically about boundaries. And it helped me to retroactively understand, okay, these are the principles. This is what I was doing. This is what I learned. But while I was doing it, I started drawing images to depict visually what I was reading about, because the books were all words and I'm a pretty visual person. And so those drawings turned into handouts, which turned into a workbook, which is now the spine of my boundaries coaching program. So what I've done is figured out how to accelerate the boundary building process for other people so they don't have to take this meandering haphazard process the way that I did. And I focus on women and professional women because that's me. I'm basically coaching former me. I was a professional woman. I actually built boundaries while I was still at Yale. At the time when I got into recovery, I'd been there for 17 years, and I had a super codependent relationship with my boss that whole time. And when I alone built boundaries, the ripple effect on my team and on our project was insane. I was like, oh my God, none of these other people are in recovery. Why are all these changes happening? So it just goes to show how just when one person builds boundaries, it can really affect an entire team, an environment. And I could go on and on and on about the myriad ways in which recovery has changed my life. But I will pause there and breathe and let you, take me where you want me to go with all that.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's amazing. And I really appreciate the layers that you've been through to get to where you are today, to find your niche. And I think, one of the things we talked about the first time we connected was entrepreneurs suck at boundaries. So I'd really like to take it from there. First of all, I don't know if everyone understands what a boundary is, so maybe we can define it, and then let's expand upon entrepreneurs sucking at boundaries.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I define a boundary is it's a standard that you have for your life, hopefully that you live up to. So there are limits beyond which you will not let yourself go or let other people go. And I do a lot of networking. I'm a connector by nature. And I have noticed, especially women entrepreneurs, absolutely suck at boundaries. And so what I mean by that is things like they work with clients who are draining them, and that they're not getting the amount of money for the amount of labor that they're putting in, but they're afraid to increase their prices or let those people go. Maybe they work with vendors or they have employees who are toxic, and they just keep those people around and don't either set boundaries or let go. Letting go of people is like the harshest kind of boundary. I think a lot of people think of boundaries as walls, and most of, like 99% of the time, they're not. But every once in a while, we need a wall. So if you have like a toxic or unsafe or inebriated person, you need a wall, right? But most of the time, it's about deciding these are the standards of my life and I'm going to live up to them. So a lot of times entrepreneurs are afraid to increase their prices. They let the scope of the work that they agreed for creep and creep and creep and creep, and don't charge any more money. They're afraid to delegate. So they feel like they have to do everything. So their job description is everything. And even when they have employees, they don't use the boundary of the job description to give the work to that person. They not only do they not delegate, but because of not delegating, they might work like 70 million hours a week, end up resenting their business. I would say resentment is an excellent indicator of it's time to either set a boundary or strengthen a boundary. Maybe they give away way too much free stuff. And I'm a fan of giving, I give tons of free stuff away. I believe it's really important to give away free stuff, but you don't want to give everything away for free. And so, would it be helpful if I gave an example of an entrepreneur that I worked with and helped her kind of build boundaries into her business? Okay. So this woman was a social media manager. She had actually gone to school for graphic design and was working in the restaurant business and just started, because she was young, managing the social media account for the restaurant. And then someone else that was like friends of them, she started managing theirs and really took all the principles she learned in graphic design and started basically being a social media manager. And she was really good at it. And she was trying to get new clients. And she started the first thing because she was helping them out. So she charged them just pennies, but she did everything for them, including the relationships with the followers, deciding what got posted, when got posted, going to the restaurant, taking the picture. She did everything. And they texted her and just really, I almost said took advantage of her, but this is a misnomer. She gave them the advantage by not setting up any boundaries. And it's easy to see how that could happen in a case like that. So when she met with me, she said, I just don't know how I'm going to set boundaries with these people because, they're my friends at this point. And basically, she didn't want to hurt their feelings. So I want to say something about that. That is a very common reason that people don't want to set boundaries. So I'm not advocating that you actively hurt people's feelings. However, number one, you're afraid of hurting other people's feelings. Meanwhile, you're hurting your own feelings. And number two, there's a difference between harming someone and hurting them. So it might hurt you to use a needle to take a splinter out of your finger, but it's not going to harm you. In fact, it's going to heal you. It might hurt someone's feelings if you set a boundary with them. It's not going to harm them. And it might heal the relationship because you're being honest with them about what's okay and what's not okay. Even if it doesn't heal the relationship with the other party, it will heal your relationship with yourself because you have shown up and followed through for yourself in a way you maybe never did before. So she did not want to hurt their feelings and just was like, I don't think I can have this conversation. So I talked to her about like what she was offering and what she was doing. And it was like, she was just doing whatever people wanted at any time. And I said, all right, here's what you want to do. You want to put some boundaries around your offerings. So she came up with 3 tiered packages and said to people, for this package, here's what you get. For this higher level package, you get this many services. And for this highest level package, these are all the services you get. If you want to do a la carte services, you can, but it's a premium price. So if there was something that wasn't included in one of those packages that people want to just buy as a one-off, she could do it. So she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And what happened also when she started getting clients with those packages, she told them up front, this is my role and this is your role. This is how and when you're going to communicate with me, which was not on her cell phone, on her personal text. She got a separate phone for her business, which she put away after business hours. And she was amazed at how much less work she had to do, how much less drama she had, and how much more money she was making. Now, she still had those first 2 clients, but when she started to see the contrast in the difference between what it was like in this peaceful, easy flowing, money making, not quite effortless, but much less effort situation with these new clients with these packages. And the old clients she had, she was like, oh no, like I can't keep doing it. So she said to them, I'm going to give you 2 months notice. I will no longer be doing what I'm doing for you. If you want to work with me, I would love that, but it's going to be in one of these packages. And they kept not responding. And she was like, she kept giving them notice, like, this is what's going to happen. And then like the week before time was up, they were like, what are we going to do? And she was like, well, you could buy one of these packages, but they were getting so much from her for so little that to them, it wasn't worth the money. And they ended up not doing social media anymore after that. And she ended up being able to have the kind of business that she really wanted to have. So she set boundaries around her pricing. She set boundaries around the packages. She set boundaries around the roles. She set boundaries around how they communicate, and she set boundaries around the hours during which she could communicate. And it changed everything for her. And those are just a few examples. There are so many other examples about boundaries in business.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I have a question about my own boundaries, and I was curious to your take on this. So, me being on my own for 7 years as a solo entrepreneur, and of course I have like contractors and people I coach with and mentors, but it's really just me. And, I have people in my life who want to become an entrepreneur, and they're very talented and they already have a platform started, but they have never taken the leap. They still have the 9 to 5. And one of the questions I have is, I have a big event coming up, and it's the biggest event of my year. It's the most financially abundant, and it's also the most time consuming. And I had a friend who ran into a trouble with his car and needed my help, which is so rare that I even get asked that type of help. And it was during this most incredibly busy, important week of the year. And this person I did help out. And then they asked for another day of help. And that's when I just said to them, hey, let me look at my schedule. But I have this. And as soon as I said that, there was this like kind of, you could feel the energy shift of like, you don't want to help me. You just don't want to help me. And I said, no, it's not that I don't want to help you. And then the person hung up on me. So it made me feel a certain way. And I'm kind of curious, what would you do in that situation to maybe create, some clarity and a boundary and also maintain the friendship?
Yeah. So I want to first address the feelings. Like you had feelings, my guess is guilt and shame. Those are the most common things that come up with people when they set boundaries when they first start. Like I don't have guilt and shame anymore when I set boundaries. I did in the beginning, and I felt like I was going to die from it, to be honest with you. So I absolutely sympathize with that. And really the antidote, the thing that happened for me over time was realizing when I decide how I want to live my life, like what's important to me, what matters to me, and I live in alignment with that, that brings me into integrity with myself. I was always worried about my integrity with other people, even though I was like dishonest all the time before recovery, but didn't know it. But now I care about my integrity with me. And so when I set boundaries according to what matters to me, I feel good about that. And I don't feel guilty about that, even if other people are mad at me, because I know that I live my life. I don't live your life. And you're probably judging me by your values, not mine. So they're not always going to line up. And honestly, Jesse, it was the boundary building process that got me to stop caring so much more what people think of me than what I think of me. And interestingly, being able to care more what I think of me than what other people do is sort of the core that enables me to really set healthy boundaries. That's the shift that I made, was I was so focused out there on what does he think, what does she think, or what are they doing, or what are they thinking or saying about me? What does he need? What does she need? And now I actually give more service in terms of hours per week now that I have healthy boundaries. But I also start from me. What do I want? What's important to me, what matters to me. So like understanding the guilt and the shame is part of the package when you first start setting boundaries. I think that's really important, and that can go away as you get better and better at it. I think that you cannot convince someone else. If you tell them, I really do want to help you, but I do have some other priorities. And if they take that personally and decide that it means you don't want to help them, there's really not much that you can do about that. If it was me personally, I would probably, after my event was over, circle back with them and check in with them and say, hey, can we chat about what happened? If they say no, or if they don't reply, I might say something one other time. And if they don't, then I would let it go. But if they wanted to chat, I would say, I hope you understand. I really did want to help you, but this was an incredibly important, time for me. It was a crunch time for me. And, this is my business and it's my livelihood, and I can't afford to not be there. And, depending on what they say, if they end up still taking it personally, there's really not much that you can do about it. This is where the serenity prayer comes in. What we cannot change is what other people think of us. And what we can change is what we think of ourselves, which is, I was doing the right thing for me. And you just said, you're a solopreneur. This is the biggest event of the year for you. Like, it would make total sense to anybody not emotionally connected to this situation that you would choose you and your business over this. So we can't change other people into the kind of people that approve of what we do, that agree with what we, the decisions we make, that value the things that we value. Just like we can't we can't get an alcoholic to get sober or to go to rehab. We can't change other people. So the other thing that I would say, like, to preempt something like that, what you said that second time, let me check my schedule, that's perfect. When someone asks you to do something, pausing is my number one tool of recovery. I cannot use any of my other tools of recovery without pausing. When it comes to setting boundaries, if you don't 100% know what the answer is, then pause and say something like, I need to think about it. I'll get back to you. I have to check my schedule. I have to check with my partner. I have to look at my calendar, whatever it is you have to say. Or if you know that the answer is going to be no, but you don't have it in you right in that moment to say no to them, you say, I need some time to think about it. And then you collect yourself in a soon future time and come back to them and say, I've thought about it. And the answer is no. Because sometimes we just don't have it in us to say no at the moment. And we say yes when we don't really want to. And that is that was me. I said yes all the time. And then I got upset. Like, I'd be like, I can't believe that she has asked me 50 times to help her. Well, you know why she asked me 50 times? Because I said yes 49 times. So I acculturated her. I trained her. She wasn't taking advantage of me. I was giving her the advantage. So I would say pausing is the thing to do. So I hope that I've answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the real-time coaching. That was really helpful. Really shows your level of personal growth in this area, and then your expertise as a professional and a coach. And I want to just connect it to, boundaries. I've heard you say this too. Boundaries are the antidote to codependency. And I'm curious, what are the steps, like the first steps to start building boundaries?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And I don't think it's the same for everybody. I can say the steps that I take my clients through. But I would like to say something very quickly about why I say it's the antidote, boundaries are the antidote to codependence. Because when we're codependent, the focus is out there on other people, on other people, places, and things, essentially. So we are only okay if everybody and everything out there is okay. That's what we believe. It's not actually true because it's not possible. And so when we learn to build healthy boundaries, we have to focus on ourselves, because my boundaries are for me. And by the way, they're not against you. They're for me. And they're about me. They're not about other people. They're not about controlling other people. We can influence other people, but we can't control them. And what I mean by that is, if you have a consistent dynamic with somebody and you are doing this dance with them and you've been doing it for years and you want it to change, you can influence that by changing your end of the dynamic. So Harriet Lerner, who wrote the book, The Dance of Anger, uses that metaphor of the dance. And she says, if you're dancing with someone and you change the steps of your dance, they have to change their steps or exit the dance. same metaphor with boundaries. If you change your end of the dynamic of the way you're interacting with someone, they will automatically change. So when it comes to building boundaries, it's the antidote to codependence because you're starting to focus on yourself. So what I start with all my clients is determining their top 5 values. So I have this process I take them through because those are the guideposts for when and where to set boundaries. So I'll use health as an example. It's a pretty common one. Lots of people can identify with it. So as a recovering compulsive overeater, I eat 3 meals a day, two snacks. I measure my food. I don't eat sugar. I have a whole list of red light foods. I try not to socialize around food. So I don't it's not that I won't ever go out to lunch or dinner with people, but mostly I'm like, can we go for a walk or for coffee or something like that? So those are some boundaries that I have. They're standards that I have. I don't eat these foods. I do eat these foods. I eat approximately at this time. I only eat so much food. I eat at these times, that sort of thing. Because I value my health. And so if somebody says, hey, we want you to go out to this brunch buffet on Sunday, and I say, that doesn't really work for me. Can we get together for coffee later? If they want to judge me for not going to brunch with them on Sunday, then I'm okay with that because number one, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock isn't a good time for me because I have eaten breakfast, then I need to eat lunch. And going to a buffet, very difficult for me. I don't need to have a giant spread of food out in front of me. And number 3, I'm trying not to socialize around food. Also, I go to church on Sunday morning. So it just doesn't really work for me. And if they want to judge me for that, I can live with it because there's all these important anchors that I have that let me know, this is what matters to me. And if your friendship with me is so flimsy that you can't handle that I'm not going to go out to brunch with you, is that really a friendship that I want to keep? So we start with values. Those are the guideposts that we use. The next thing I work on is mindset, which I literally work on throughout the entire program, but I'll share a couple of nuggets. So I already shared the, harms versus hurts. That's a huge one for people. This was a game changer for me. I believe I heard this phrase on a podcast. I use it all the time. Info, not ammo. When you are going about any kind of personal development program, whether it's learning how to build healthy boundaries or anything else, you are going to make mistakes and you are going to learn things about yourself you don't like. And I encourage you to use it as information to learn, integrate, and grow from, not as ammunition to beat the shit out of yourself. So even though I have always been a very positive, optimistic person, one of the many things that came to light in recovery for me is that I was literally scanning the horizon at all times, looking for where can I beat the shit out of myself. So when I heard this info now, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Another very similar saying is the term flawsome. So it's a combination of flawed and awesome. So I somehow internalized the notion that I shouldn't have flaws. And if I had them, then I goddamn well better hide them. And so I had all these different facades up and I was really defensive all the time. And this comes to the black and white thinking that so many of us in recovery, maybe not so many, maybe everybody in recovery has, where it's you're either flawed or you're awesome. And so it started to break open my black and white thinking that if I had flaws, that meant I wasn't awesome. And so I started to internalize that and I stopped judging myself so much for having flaws. And I started being more comfortable with them. I started sharing them with other people. And then when I stopped judging myself so much, I realized, oh my God, I stopped judging other people so much too, because just like I'm flawsome, they're flawsome too. Another one is you don't get better at something by not doing it. This I was introduced to when I first became an entrepreneur, when I met somebody who boosts entrepreneurs and said, I want to coach, but I don't know how. And she goes, well, you have to just start doing it. And I'm like, but I don't know how. And she said, Barb, you don't get better at something by not doing it, which sounds really obvious when you hear that. And so you don't get better at setting boundaries. You don't get better at any new behavior unless you actually do it. And then another one is anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first. So I know many of us were raised with anything worth doing is worth doing right. And that may be so, but anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first. So I love to use the example of babies learning to walk. Part of the process of learning to walk is babies tumble and toddle and stumble and fall. Here's the deal. The reason that babies have the strength to finally walk is because they build up that strength by pushing up from falling. So falling is part of the process of learning to walk. Making mistakes is part of the process of getting better. So you are not inherently flawed. You are not uniquely flawed. You are flawsome. So those are just a few examples of some of the mindset things. And then another one that I harp on throughout my program is keep the focus on yourself. You know, as I mentioned earlier, that we're so used to being focused out there that we need to bring the focus in. So do you want me to just keep going to the next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very valuable, everything you're saying. Maybe give us maybe one or two more, and then I'd like to dive into a couple of things too about entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'd like to flesh out keep the focus on yourself, because this is really deep. So to me, there's at least 5 ways that I talk about keeping the focus on yourself. So number 1 is ask yourself in whatever situation, what do I want or need in this situation? I literally never asked that. It was just not a thing. Just this morning, one of my clients, she is going through a pretty painful divorce, and her soon-to-be ex-wife is actually away for 2 weeks. She's in the military doing her yearly thing. And she has these 2 weeks open to herself. And the idea of putting herself first on the top of the list of what to do during that time is so foreign to her, because she's not used to asking, what do I want and need? Like, this is how difficult it can be for people. So asking yourself, what do I want and need here? In the beginning, you're not going to be able to do the thing that you think you want and need. Just so you know, just give you a heads up, but just start thinking, what do I want and need here? Another one is mind your own business. Like, I was constantly foisting my help on other people. Like, I gave unsolicited advice all the time. Ironically, especially about romantic relationships, even though I never had a healthy one until recovery, I am now, for the first time, in the only healthy relationship I've ever had. We've been together for 5.5 years, and I absolutely love my sweetheart. I had no clue this kind of relationship was possible. And I want to add, it has everything to do with him having really healthy boundaries and me having really healthy boundaries. So mind your own business. It's okay, of course, to help people. It's what makes the world go round. But please get people's consent before you help them. Or better yet, wait until they ask. The third way is, what's my part? This is a language that we learn in 12-step recovery. What is my part? Or, in lay people's language, what might I be doing to contribute to this situation? If you have a situation that occurs over and over again in multiple areas of your life, for example, if you keep thinking, everybody takes advantage of me, look at your part. Like, what might I be doing that's contributing to that dynamic? Because once you start looking, you will find something. And when you do, it's info, not ammo. So this is information for you to learn, integrate, and grow from, not to beat yourself up. The fourth way is to take really good care of yourself. I neglected the shit out of myself because I was so busy with other people. I didn't want to be perceived as selfish, which I think is one of the worst things you can call a woman, is selfish. I don't know why that is. It's actually selfless to take care of yourself, because when you take care of yourself, instead of trying to pour from an empty cup, you pour from the overflow. You have more than enough to give. Well, the only way to have overflow is if you take care of yourself first. And then the fifth way about keeping the focus on yourself has to do with feelings. So it's about not managing other people's feelings and not feeling their feelings. So I used to be, before I had boundaries, I'll call it permeable. I literally felt other people's feelings. And one of the ways that I stopped doing that was literally like putting my hand up and saying, it's not happening to me. Not necessarily out loud, but it's not happening to me. It's not happening to me. And then also, I did a lot of trying to manage people's feelings. I wanted them to be happy with me. Like people pleasing is all about manipulating people into being pleased. I don't manipulate people anymore. And it's not my job to make sure that someone is happy. If somebody is going through something difficult, they get to have difficult feelings. Like, I don't want to push them down, but I used to feel like it was my job to cheer people up, whether they wanted to be cheered up or not. So staying out of people's feelings. So those are my 5 tips on keeping the focus on your.
Wow, I had other questions, but it sort of was answered in that share. So thank you, Barb. That was really powerful. I really like that about people pleasing too, because I know that I've been a chronic people pleaser, which is just a result and a response from trauma and needs not being met as a child.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can speak to that a little more. So like when it comes to people pleasing, I know the source of my people pleasing. I've worked on it the most I've ever worked on it in the last year. And I'm curious to people listening who are chronic people pleasers. What type of advice do you have for chronic people pleasers?
Yeah. So, start with values, like what matters to you. And I think this, like I mentioned, like I've come to care more what I think of me than what other people do. And it doesn't mean I don't care at all what other people think of me. Of course I do. But what I heard somebody say last year, which I love, is it's fine to seek others' approval, but only if you have your own approval first. Because what I used to do was not even be concerned about my approval. And then I would feel like crap because I just violated my own values and I didn't know that I was an approval seeker. I didn't know that I was a people pleaser. When I got into recovery, I was like, oh, I help all these people because I'm nice. I thought I was nice. And then in CODA specifically, I remember saying to this woman, okay, I'm starting to see that there's like this continuum of helpfulness, where on one end, we've got kindly, helpful, functional, healthy behavior. And on the other end, we've got the unhealthy, enabling, rescuing, fixing, dysfunctional behavior. And it's pretty clear what the difference is between the two of those. But where I'm confused is in the middle. Like, where do you cross over from being helpful to being rescuing? And the woman said to me, Barb, it really depends on your motive. Why are you helping them? Are you helping them because you want to be helpful? Or are you helping them because you want them to like you? And I was like, I'm totally helping them because I want to be helpful. But Jesse, that question seeped into my brain, and I started to realize oh my God, I really do. I want their approval. It wasn't so much like me. It was think that I'm nice, think that I'm helpful. Don't think that I'm a bad person. So for me, it was more like I'm a disapproval avoider rather than an approval seeker. And as I started to see that, then the question of motives was helpful to me because I couldn't see that my motive was approval. I thought it was because, I'm a nice person. Meanwhile, I was resentful all the time because they were taking advantage of me. And now I was like, oh my God, they're not taking advantage of me. I'm giving it to them. And so now one of my most important questions when I'm trying to decide what's the right boundary for me or what's a healthy behavior for me, what are my motives? Why am I doing it? And I really have gotten so much more clarity about what's okay and not okay. And what's interesting is before recovery, I was a volunteer-aholic. I volunteered for 17 different nonprofit organizations over the years. And now that I have healthy boundaries, I actually give more hours per week in service than I ever did when I was an alcoholic, when I was a volunteer-aholic. Because I do it by choice, not by compulsion. I do it strategically. So I plan it around my life. I do it from a place of abundance. So I'm doing it out of the overflow of my cup. And I do it in the world of recovery, by the way. So it benefits me too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of filling my cup while giving at the same time, because we know that we can't keep what we have if we don't give it away.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole stopping the people pleasing really starts with, what matters to you, what's important to you, and, getting into alignment and into integrity with yourself. And also realizing, like, I didn't understand when I learned that people pleasing was manipulative and dishonest. I was like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. And the thing is, I'm not a horrible person. These patterns came from somewhere. I was a child who didn't have a lot of options. Now that I know that it's dishonest and manipulative, it's my job to stop that. So it's dishonest because we're saying yes when we really want to say no. We're saying that we like things that we really don't like. We're perhaps saying no to things that we actually really want to do, either because we're afraid to be judged by other people or because we're so busy doing stuff for them, we don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's dishonest. And then it's manipulative because we're going about the behavior for the express purpose of pleasing them, getting a particular result. That's called manipulation. And so I, as a woman of honest integrity, as a woman in recovery who's trying to practice these principles in all my affairs, I can't do the manipulating. I can't do the dishonesty because I don't want to have a relapse.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a woman of integrity. So really, like, taking a look at that behavior and seeing, like, why am I doing this? And is there another way? If I want people to like, then I should be who I actually am, be my genuine, authentic self. And it is possible that you might lose some people and some people might fade to the periphery. And I know that that's painful. That's happened for me. But what that means is they've gotten out of the way so your people can find you. Because when you start being the real you, you start attracting people who really want the real you, and you don't have to pretend that you like things that you don't.
Yeah, I have a question on that because there's a lot of people, and that's really powerful. Thank you so much. And definitely a re-listen for me, that last part. But I'm curious when I think about the people that are trying to get started to be a coach, they're starting to be interested in coaching people because they've heard your story or they heard my story and, they're like, wow, I have a story too. And I actually can help people. And when it comes to the world of recovery, which is a very broad term, it could be recovery from your procrastination addiction, your addiction to food, sex. I think people really have a misnomer and a stigma towards the word recovery. And I think we're all in recovery from intergenerational trauma and societal programming. But I'm curious to the entrepreneur who wants to charge for their services or wants to become an entrepreneur that is in the helping professions, and they don't feel because of 12-step, we'll call it programming, which I don't even know if it comes from that, but they feel they can't charge for their services. Like, how can I charge to coach people on boundaries or recovery? Because it's give it away for free, right? I think a lot of people are stuck in that. So how can someone like that ask for help and start to change their mindset around charging for their services? Yeah.
So I'm going to talk specifically about 12-step recovery because that's my recovery. And so I don't take people through the steps. That's carrying the message of recovery. I talk about recovery all the time. And I'm out about recovery, which, technically, because I tell people I'm in ACA and I'm in OA, I have violated, I think it's Tradition 11. And it took me a long time to be able to publicly say, actually, it was being a guest on the Adult Child podcast. Because after I was a guest on there, I'm like, her podcast is bigger than mine. More people now know that I'm an adult child. And it freed me to talk specifically about the recovery in ACA. And I actually can live with that. I'm okay with doing that. But the difference is that I don't coach people on the 12 steps. I might talk about 12-step recovery if they're in it. Like, I would say the majority of my clients are in 12-step recovery. And those who aren't often get into it after working with me because they realize, wow, there's really something here for me. So I don't coach them on the 12 steps. The other thing I want to say, this was really helpful for me in my first years of coaching, was I came up with this affirmation: healing people is a great way to make money. There are people out there that are exploiting people and they make lots of money. How could healing people not be worth earning money for? What better thing to do? What better gift to give to a human than healing a lifelong pattern like codependence and people pleasing? Like, the transformations that I see in my clients is insane, especially how quickly it happens for many of them. And if I felt like I can't help people because it's somehow wrong to give healing away and get money for it, like, all of those people and the ripple effect of all the lives that they've touched would never happen. And so healing people is a great way to make money. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. If not,
yeah, no,
ask me more.
Yeah, I really like the way you answered that. It's a question that I like to ask when people are coming from the 12-step programs. Obviously, that's where I got my start. I was court ordered for 3 years. I had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't even have a chance to say no to that. And it's definitely a great foundation alongside mentorship, alongside personal growth and development, alongside journaling, alongside all these health habits I developed in the beginning. That became really the foundation. But yeah, I think that's just something a lot of listeners, a lot of people who I talk to, they reach out to me and they're asking for my permission almost to charge for helping people. And I'm like, where is this programming coming from? And so that was really, really helpful to hear that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Well, I hear that from people that are not in 12-step recovery, that are healers of other kinds all the time. And, my work is healing. I mean, I think of myself as a healer. I'm not the traditional healer, but I am healing deep and profound wounds and patterns from the past and changing people's lives and all of their relationships going forward by what I'm doing. That is healing work. And so for me, like, getting the mindset shift of healing people is a great way to make money definitely helped me a lot. And then the other thing, in terms of like charging for it and what to charge, like, I've been fortunate that the coaches that I have worked with that have helped me with things like pricing have also been the kind of people that say, like, we need to be strategic about it, but you also got to feel right. So they literally say, how does that feel in your body? So when I started coaching, the first person paid me $40 an hour. Now I have a 12-week package that's $3,800. But I think it started at $1,800, and then it was $2,000, then it was $2,400, and then I had a coach that was like, let's bring it up to $3,800 because you're way on the low end in the coaching world. She wanted to make it be $4,800, and I was like, I'm like, no, I can't. But when she said different amounts, and when she said $3,800, I was like, okay, that feels good in my body. And guess what? People pay it. Definitely. So it makes me feel even better, and if they can't pay it, I have goo gobs of free stuff on Instagram, on my podcast, on my website.
Yeah. I think it's really powerful. I train people in professional facilitation too. And a lot of people are also struggling there I don't know how I can charge it. Okay, but how? And I'm like, just get your reps in. Just go and do it. Get messy. You're not going to hurt anyone by facilitating healing work or change work or conversations worth having. So, it's getting over those blocks and stuff. And that can be really helpful to find a coach and to do the work you do. So I'm curious, right now, like, what vision and what is your highest intention that you're looking to manifest right now?
Professional speaking in front of very large audiences, especially organizations that serve women either in the helping professions, like care managers and social workers and teachers. But then, of course, I have a soft place in my heart for women entrepreneurs and business owners because I am one, and I work with them all the time. But, so organizations, associations, conferences, that sort of thing, I've really kind of launched into that this last year. And actually, I want to just go back to what you just said about charging. I'm going to do something I've never done before at the end of this month. And I recommend people try this if they're afraid to charge. Do a workshop and call it Pay What You Can, whether it's in person or online. And about 10 minutes before you end, say something like you advertise it as Pay What You Can. So no one will be turned away for inability to pay. But I want you to pay what you think it's worth. And I want it to be a number that feels good to you so you won't resent me for giving me the money, and that you won't feel guilty about yourself for not giving me enough money. And then if you're in person, then you pass, a basket around. And if it's online, you set up a PayPal link, a Zoom link, Venmo, whatever, and you take what people give you. That's a way for you to start dip your toes into the world of receiving, because that's another reason. Like, people are very, a lot of people in recovery have a hard time receiving. And that is one thing I want to say. People with healthy boundaries let good things in, as well as keeping like negative things out, like praise, compliments, money, ease, comfort, assistance, help, support. Like if you have healthy boundaries, you accept help. You don't just give it.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a book I just listened to, which is called Money is Not the Problem, You Are. And it talks about that money is not the solution, you are. And the problem is receiving. So you just reminded me of, like, the issue is not money and there's not enough abundance and I'm in the wrong niche or whatever it is. It's, I have trouble receiving. My problem is receiving. And because I know the universe is infinitely abundant, especially when I go into nature in summertime in New Hampshire and I see everything. I see eagles, I see osprey, I see full luscious forests and streams. And I'm like, the idea of scarcity is just the mindset.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. And I grew up with a deeply entrenched scarcity mindset, not just with money, with every time, love,
Same.
energy, don't waste effort, don't waste paper, I hear that.
Well, I feel I don't always ask this question, but I really love this question. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with my audience or guests that is on your mind or heart right now?
So what just popped into my mind, I can't believe I'm getting choked up, is my sweetheart. I was 55 and he was 60 when we met. And I did not know that this level of intimacy was possible. I used to try to hotwire intimacy by having sex early and having sexual intimacy. And I thought that was intimacy, but then I wasn't. And so I am able to be in a relationship. And there's a promise in the AA book that says we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. The area of my life in which that comes true the most frequently is in my relationship. Stuff comes out of my mouth and I'm like, oh my God, I've never said anything like that before. I just intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. And I think what it boils down to is that I tell the truth now. Like, I live in truth. One thing I heard Michelle Chalfant from the Adult Chair podcast say is adults live in fact and truth, right? So the facts are, the truth is. So I'm not mean about it, but if something bothers me, I say that it bothers me immediately. I also really appreciate him and I tell him all the time. So I tell the truth and I do it as soon as the truth becomes available to me. Like, sometimes I know, like, that didn't feel right, but I don't know what didn't feel right about it. So I might, I remember the first maybe 3 weeks into us dating, I had invited him to something and he didn't get back to me until 10 p.m. that night. Whereas previously he'd been, really responsive. So that night I texted him and I said, I'm feeling unsettled about the fact that you did not respond to me on my invitation. And I said, can you help me talk about this tomorrow? because one thing I've learned that for men, at least the heterosexual men that I've been around to talk to, they like to be asked for help, especially from women that they're dating. And so he said, absolutely. So the next day I started the conversation like this. I see this conversation as an opportunity for us to increase our intimacy. And I hope you do too. So I'm really unsettled by the fact that you've always been really communicative and very responsive, and you didn't text me for like 14 hours. And he said, well, what do you mean by unsettled? And I said, I don't really, that's as much clarity as I have. So as we process this, it turned out that what was going on for him was he was afraid to get sucked into my world. So what I was going to was a pitch event for entrepreneurs. He's on disability and he has to manage his energy, and he sees my calendar and he's like, I'm like busy. I love to be busy. Right. And he didn't even know this at the time. He really didn't. It came out in processing. He didn't want to get sucked into my world. So that was helpful that we processed it. And I said, well, and he said, I decided, I now know that it was a bad decision, that me not texting you was my answer. And I said, that will not do. Going forward, an answer is an answer, not a non-answer. And I swear to God, Jesse, that conversation set the tone for our entire relationship. I've never said any of those things. I've never said, can you help me talk about this? I've never said, I feel unsettled about this. I've never said, I see this as increasing intimacy. I've never said, I don't know what like literally none of that stuff has ever come out of my mouth. And while I'm doing it, I'm like, oh my God, who am I? And many times in my relationship with him, I'll be in it and I'll be also watching it and being like, oh my God, this would have gone completely differently in all my past relationships. And also seeing like, oh my God, look at all the ways that what I did in my previous relationships was I never said anything. And I built up a resentment. So I basically, let me put a brick between you and I that I'm not going to tell you about, but I'm going to hold you accountable for and make you pay for. And then I'm going to build more and more and more bricks. So I'm going to build a thicker and higher wall between you and me. Meanwhile, I'm blaming you the whole time, but not telling you any of this stuff. I couldn't see that I was doing any of those things, but now I can see it in retrospect. So I think for me, the honesty piece, and then also in step 4, learning my part in things changed everything for me. So what I want to tell people is that I don't care how old you are. If you are longing to have a deeply fulfilling relationship, it's possible for you. I personally believe that it's all about learning how to build healthy boundaries, because I know who I am and who I am not. I know what's my responsibility and what's not. I tell the truth. I communicate openly and clearly and directly, which I learned how to do by building healthy boundaries. So that is what I feel moved to share.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a powerful way to sort of come to a close, because I feel this was a really valuable, almost like a workshop in boundaries. And I'm really excited to share this out with the listeners. And I'm definitely going to take a listen myself and take some notes. I like to take notes. I don't do it on the podcast while I'm recording because I want to be so present. But this was one of the first.
Of course.
But this is one of the first podcasts I almost felt like I needed to grab my pen. So you did a really fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell people how they can work with you. How can they find you?
Sure. Absolutely. So what I've been saying for the longest time is my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching, but I'm starting to hang out more on LinkedIn more. So I'm at Barb Nangle. It's actually LinkedIn/in/Barb Nangle, N like neighbor, ANGLE. My podcast is called Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. So if you're already listening to this one on a podcast app, just search for that, or you can go to fragmentedtowhole.com. Links to everything about me are in my bio on Instagram. And my website is higherpowercc.com. I have tons of free resources on boundaries, both in my Instagram feed, my LinkedIn feed, and there's a page on my website specifically, Start Setting Boundaries, that has a free downloadable work tips and scripts for saying no. It has a free article. And then I have a link to my podcast playlist of episodes exclusively about boundaries. At this point, I know there's more than 30. I don't know the total. But if you want to binge a whole bunch of episodes about boundaries, just go to that page and you'll find it.
Yeah, amazing. And of course, I'm going to link all this in the show notes, and I'm going to link your free giveaway too in the show notes for sure. Link to your podcast, of course. Barb, thank you so much. This has been super enlightening, extremely helpful for me. I know it's going to be helpful for some of my listeners,
Excellent.
my friends. So thank you so much, Barb. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and keep up the good work. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching today's episode. Your support means the world to me. So thank you for liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel and to this podcast. We've got amazing content and amazing interviews coming out soon. So thanks again. Enjoy your day. Sending love and blessings to you all.